WABC-TV, Channel 7, New York.
This is the ABC Evening News with Harry Reisner and Barbara Walters, who's in California. Also Frank Reynolds and Howard K. Smith in Washington.
Good news arrived at the White House. Unemployment is down to its lowest point in 3 years. I'm Ann Compton.
A government anti-smoking drive is launched. Some critics say it's not enough. Others say it goes too far. I'm Charles Gibson.
The Israeli and Egyptian defense chiefs get together to resume the Mideast peace talks. I'm Jerry King.
Gerald Ford says he'll probably run again if Jimmy Carter does a bad job as president. I'm Barbara Walters.
Good evening. The nation's unemployment rate fell sharply last month, ending the year 1977 at 6.4%. That news from the Labor Department today was received most happily at the White House, where Ann Compton reports.
Unemployment dropped to its lowest point since the recession 3 years ago. Last year at this time, unemployment was a discouraging 7.8%. The government created thousands of jobs at a cost of $11 billion that finally brought some improvement at the end of 1977. White males always fare best. Their below-average rate of unemployment went down to 4.1%. Black male workers benefited too, although at 9.1%, blacks are still suffering more than whites. It is even worse for black teenagers, whose jobless rate actually went up from 1 year ago. President Carter and Economic Council Chairman Charles Schultz were not shy about taking credit for beating their own year-end goal.
I think that the slow impact of the programs that we put into effect were disappointing for a while, but now they're beginning to show up.
President Carter acknowledged he still wants to push through a tax cut in 1978. He also got word today that the economic growth across the country slowed in the final weeks of 1977. So there is still discouraging news to balance the good. Ann Compton, ABC News, the White House.
This is Frank Reynolds. 14 years ago today, the Surgeon General issued the first report on cigarette smoking and health. Since then, about 30 million Americans have kicked the habit. But despite all the evidence linking cigarette smoking to disease and death, there are still 54 million Americans puffing away, including 6 million teenagers. Today, the federal government launched a new drive to help smokers stop and persuade non-smokers not to start. The man who announced the new program believes it can be done. We have a series of reports on the smoking situation. First, here is Charles Gibson in Washington.
He once smoked 3 packs a day. Now HEW Secretary Joseph Califano is leading the largest government effort yet to get people to stop smoking as he did.
I do bring the frightening knowledge that cigarette smoking is public health enemy #1 in the United States of America. People who smoke are committing slow-motion suicide. It cannot be ignored. Smoking ruins health. Smoking kills.
The Califano campaign against smoking will contain a study on the effectiveness of raising the excise tax on cigarettes. It's been 8 cents a pack since 1951. Urging the Civil Aeronautics Board to ban smoking on commercial aircraft. A warning to users of contraceptive pills that they run increased risks if they smoke. A study on the possibility of strengthening the warning on cigarette packages. And a stepped-up educational campaign to aim anti-smoking messages primarily at teenagers, an age group where smoking has increased. Califano wants to use network television time for his anti-smoking spots. Cigarette industry advertising has been banned from TV since 1971. The campaign will be run by a new Office of Smoking and Health, which will spend $6 million on educational efforts next year. As one critic said, that's like sending a mosquito out to fight jets, since the cigarette industry spent 83 times that much on advertising last year, and past educational efforts have met with mixed success. Americans have already been bombarded with anti-smoking commercials.
Save your breath. Don't smoke cigarettes.
Yet the number of people who do smoke in this country has gone up a bit since 1964, and a record number of cigarettes was sold last year. Critics charge Califano did not go far enough, that he should have proposed programs to help people quit, that cigarettes should be regulated like a drug. Those arguments were rejected, leaving the great paradox. One government branch, HEW, runs an anti-smoking campaign. Another branch, agriculture, gives hundreds of millions of dollars in loans to tobacco farmers each year. Charles Gibson, ABC News, Washington.
The tobacco industry is outraged over Califano's decision. They say there's still nothing conclusive linking cigarettes to cancer and circulatory diseases, and that the secretary is just overreacting.
I think Secretary Califano has taken on a personal crusade to attack the tobacco industry, and even more importantly, to control the lives of those people who choose, out of freedom of choice, to smoke.
The thousands of families which depend on this $17 billion industry are caught in the wake of Califano's proposals. He's not only going after those who already smoke, his primary target is getting to people before they start. George Strait, ABC News.
This is Bettina Gregory. By high school, many teenagers are already addicted smokers. To prevent them from picking up the habit, you've got to get to them in about 7th grade, when they first start experimenting with cigarettes. A federally funded research project here in Houston has shown virtually all 7th graders believe smoking is dangerous. The cancer warnings have gotten through, but they're ignored.
About getting sick and things like that are for the old people. I'm not going to get sick, right? So it didn't bother me.
What overrides the fear of cancer? This study shows it's the fear of not being accepted by the group.
Now they want to be cool, you know, they want to, they want to be like everybody else. I mean, they want to be a big kid now, so they start smoking, hanging out with the gang outside that smokes and all that,
To counteract this peer pressure, psychologist Richard Evans made a series of films that teach junior high school students how to say no.
You think I don't smoke? Come on, man, take the cigarette. I don't smoke.
So far, it works. Among the students who've participated in the program, 50% fewer start to smoke. The results show if you can give junior high school students the means to resist the pressures to smoke during these very susceptible years, by the time they get to high school, they'll be independent enough to keep on saying,
no. 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 No.
No.
No, thank you.
Last night on this program, former President Ford suggested that President Carter talks too much, particularly about foreign policy. The White House does not seem impressed by Mr. Ford's advice. President Carter will hold another news conference tomorrow. ABC News will carry the conference live at 2:30 Eastern Time.
Coming up, Jerry King on Israelis and Egyptians talking about peace in Cairo.
Do you want to lose weight and still have a good, nourishing dinner every day? Now you can, with new PVM. The PVM diet plan limits and controls your calorie intake. And PVM powder with the diet gives you high protein, vitamins, and minerals for balanced nutrition. You mix PVM powder with orange juice for breakfast and with low-fat milk for lunch. And the plan includes menus for full-course meals like this. For dinner, the PVM plan. Start today, and this time you'll really lose weight.
Does your big 12-cup coffee maker make more coffee than you need? Then get the new Mini Drip coffee maker from Hamilton Beach. The Mini Drip is designed to brew 2 to 4 cups of coffee fast. Every cup hot, fresh brewed, and delicious, not warmed over. Want another cup or two? It's yours in less than 3 minutes without 1 drop of waste. So stop pouring coffee and energy down the drain. Get the new Mini Drip, a great gift. Only from the Hamilton Beach Scoville World of Appliances.
The Mideast peace talks resumed in Cairo today with a meeting of the Egyptian and Israeli defense ministers. They continue to disagree over the future of Israeli settlements in the Sinai. Jerry King reports.
Israel's one-time super hawk, Defense Minister Ezer Weitzman, flew into Cairo 7 hours before the meeting was to begin. Within minutes, he was on another airplane for the 600-mile flight to Aswan to see President Sadat. There was no official word on their discussions, but it was known Sadat wanted to emphasize his demand that the Jewish settlements in the Sinai be dismantled as part of any peace agreement. Weitzman's Egyptian counterpart, War Minister Mohammed Gamassi, also attended the talks in Aswan. Within an hour, the 2 defense ministers were on their way back to Cairo for the formal talks. And formal it was. Gamassi, looking ill at ease without his familiar gold braid general's uniform, waiting in a reception line for the arrival of the Israelis. As Weitzman led his delegation in, he was prepared to be hit hard on the Sinai issue, and apparently he was. Weitzman wanted to talk about Israeli security, demilitarized zones, and a timetable for a Sinai withdrawal. But in a joint communique after the first round of talks, spokesmen for both sides made it clear that Jewish settlements in the Sinai have become the central issue.
General Gamassi declared
and asked for a complete withdrawal of Israel from Sinai. Israeli, not Israeli forces. I said Israel from Sinai and not Israeli forces. All Israelis.
There was a statement held by General Gamassi, and there was another statement, an answer, in the same spirit, in the same constructive and friendly spirit, addressed by General Weizmann later. In Cairo, the two sides can get down to the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of a peace agreement. But as yet, they can only theorize, in essence, make a feasibility study, while they await the guidelines they really need to be worked out at the political talks in Jerusalem, which begin on Monday. Jerry King, ABC News, Cairo.
This is Bill Stewart in Yamit, the biggest Israeli settlement in the Sinai, roughly 40 miles outside the old Israeli borders. Since the peace talks between Israel and Egypt began, Yamit has become a boom town. Families rushing to move here, land speculators buying up every parcel in sight. One man bought 5 parcels. Of the 54 land plots which went on sale last week at $3,000 apiece, the last 7 of these plots sold today. Now there is a waiting list to buy more.
I think it's a good investment because if Yamit really will be a peace town on the border between Israel and Egypt, it will be a booming town. And you know, as all over the world, land is going, value of the land is up if everything is okay.
Already new homes are under construction, most costing $27,000. Home buyers are encouraged by Israeli Prime Minister Begin's negotiating stance. But even if this land reverts to Egypt, Yamit's families, who now number 375, will still be protected by a Jewish military force.
We're in the sand, we're in the desert. We're with the Arabs, we're working with them. We want to live in peace with them. We want to make our investment in people and in money and make it pay off. The peace town.
And so in the Sinai Desert as elsewhere, the issues of war and peace are not the issues of armies and land and disengagement, but rather the issues of people, their families, financial investments, or hopes for the future. It has been called the human side of war, and it is surely why there is so much hope for peace.
Now there are 4 cosmonauts in orbit. The 2 aboard Soyuz 27 made a successful docking today with a Russian spacecraft already in orbit, already occupied. Jules Bergman has details.
The 2 new cosmonauts opened the hatch after docking with the Salyut space station a day after blasting off. They were in good shape. Here's how they got there. Soyuz 27 reached the same orbit as Salyut after a series of rocket maneuvers, pulled up close, and with a small burst of its thrusters, moved in for the actual docking. The 2 new crew members joined the veterans who've been up a month in an informal celebration. The Russians now have what they were after, the world's first manned space station in an orbit good for at least a year to do weightlessness experimentation and manufacturing. New crews sent up to resupply Salyut will relieve these cosmonauts who would then come down to land. This is Jules Bergman, ABC News reporting.
In Rome, violence intensified as the Italian government was caught at one of its worst dilemmas, whether or not to give the communists a say in the government. Extremists on the left and right took the battle to the streets, setting cars on fire, shooting at police, and bombing the homes of politicians. There were 68 arrests in Rome last night while the ruling Christian Democrats debated this latest crisis in Parliament. While the West European brand of communism seems to be gaining strength, the Soviet Union is unhappy with its independent direction. Today, Moscow harshly criticized Europe's communist parties for deviating from the strict concepts of Marxism-Leninism. The U.S. is also unhappy about the communist drift in Western Europe, as John Scali reports.
Italy's Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti is a conspicuous symbol of how Eurocommunism is developing into a dynamic force which may shape the future of Western Europe. President Carter welcomed him to the White House recently as a trusted ally, fully recognizing he survives in office because of communist support. But in Andreotti's case, it's support from an increasingly nationalist Italian Communist Party, which boldly advertises its independence from Moscow. Party chief Enrico Berlinguer masterminds this revolutionary new doctrine, which gives Italian communists the right to adapt Marxism to local conditions or even oppose Moscow policies when necessary. De-emphasizing the Moscow connection has been so successful that Italian voters have given the communists almost as many seats as the Christian Democrats in the Italian parliament. The communists now openly cooperate with the Andreotti government. Amidst increasing predictions, he soon may be forced to accept them into his cabinet. French communist leader Georges Marchais has also stepped gingerly onto the Euro-communist bandwagon. He has embraced some policies which upset Moscow, such as support for the Atlantic Pact, but he has refused to dilute traditional communist doctrine, such as nationalization of key industries. As a result, his partnership with the French socialists has collapsed, and he's announced the communists will run their own candidates in the March elections. While in Paris, President Carter met with French socialist leader Mitterrand and warned him against the danger of renewing any alliance with the communists. This is considerably different than what he and his spokesman have been saying before. Until now, they have implied that if the Europeans want to vote for the communists, there's nothing that the United States could or should do to stop them. But now that he has spoken up against the French communists, can he say less about the dangers of communism in Italy? John Scali, ABC News, at the White House.
In South Korea, millionaire Tongsun Park agreed today to answer all questions about charges that he bribed American congressmen. However, the agreement with U.S. prosecutors excluded any questions about Park's alleged connections with the Korean Central Intelligence Agency. The winter's worst cold wave had millions of Americans shivering again today. And again today, utilities reduced electric power from Minnesota to the Tennessee Valley. In Ohio, the weather forced shutdowns of several industrial plants.
Coming up, Gerald Ford talks to Barbara Walters about another run for the presidency.
Hi-ho! Your Admiral here to inspect your shipload of values.
Ready for inspection, sir, with outstanding values. We're offering this automatic ice maker kit free with selected Admiral side-by-side refrigerators.
Roger.
No, it's Walter, sir.
Roger.
And on Admiral television sets that adapt for remote control, the remote control unit is free, a feature that could cost up to $90 on some other brands.
A shipload of values you can be proud of, lad.
Thank you, sir.
Sale ends February 4th at participating Admiral dealers.
This is a gas flame. It keeps 40 million families warm. It cooks 90 million meals a day. Millions of jobs depend on it. This is a gas flame. It provides by far the biggest share of energy for industry. Gas, clean energy for today and tomorrow.
When occasional itching, irritation, or discomfort from hemorrhoids is a problem,
try Tux pre-moistened pads. Tux are soft, hygienic pads that offer soothing, cooling, temporary relief.
Don't hospitals use Tux?
Tux are used in over 2,500 of the nation's hospitals.
Where can I get Tux?
At your pharmacy.
Tux pre-moistened pads for itching, irritation, or hemorrhoids.
Soothing, cooling, hygienic relief from Park Davis.
How do you spell relief?
When I get acid indigestion, I spell relief, R-O-L-A-I-D-S.
For heartburn? R-O-L-A-I-D-S. Rolaids spells relief. In this test with Rolaids active ingredient, laboratory acid changes color to prove Rolaids consumes 47 times its weight in excess stomach acid. How do you spell relief?
For gas, I spell it R-O-L-A-I-D-S.
Rolaids spells relief.
Gerald Ford says he'll decide if he'll run for president, depending on how he thinks Jimmy Carter is running the country. This is more important to him, he says, than the polls. His decision is a year away, and during this year he'll campaign for Republicans running for Congress.
If the polls showed that I was way behind, I think it would make some difference. But it's much more fundamental for me to make that decision on the basis of how the present administration is doing its job. If they're not doing well, then I would certainly feel it an obligation as well as an opportunity.
But when will you decide that? That takes 4 years before you know.
No, sometime in 1979, Barbara. That's plenty of time.
Okay.
And in addition, another factor would be how the Republican Party was developing, how the various candidates were progressing. I would hope to be, if I became a candidate, and I emphasize if I became a candidate, that I might be a healing process or a person that would bridge the differences between certain candidates and certain other candidates.
Listen, just between us. When you go to bed at night and just before you go to sleep, and you're thinking of really what makes you feel happy, is it the thought that you're going to run again and maybe be president, or the hope that you won't have to run again and you can continue this life?
It's a hard decision, Barbara. And I must say...
Oh, blurt it out. What's the feeling of that?
If I told you, I'd probably have second thoughts, and it's really premature, Barbara. I enjoy spending a lot more time with Betty and doing a lot of things I never had time to do. But I also have a feeling that from my experience, I have an obligation to do something if the situation develops that a person with my background could make a contribution. So it's a balancing act, and I go to bed at night and I offer a little prayer to try to make the right decision. But the only response I've gotten so far is that you better wait and see, Jerry.
Ronald Reagan is going around the country now, to a great degree, lining up support in the Republican National Committee in the various states. Does that trouble you? You're not doing that very much, I hear.
No, I am not one that goes out and tries to manipulate in the party organizations. I think it's more important for me as an ex-president to relate to the public as a whole. It doesn't do any good to win the nomination if you don't win the election.
We also asked President Ford about Richard Nixon. Has he seen him? No. Did he see the Frost interviews? Yes. And what did he think?
I didn't feel that he enhanced his position in the minds of the American people, and I think the polls reflected that, if anything, he probably came out of it with more minuses than pluses. I was saddened by some of the things I heard, and it overall, in my honest opinion, didn't really help his future image in this country.
Mr. President, do you think Richard Nixon has any chance for a political comeback?
I'm sure as time passes, he'll have more opportunities to move around. He's been very, very isolated, as you know. He's been writing a book, preparing for the Frost interviews. I think it would be helpful if he did move around a bit more, but from a political point of view, I don't see any possibility.
By the way, one of the factors in Gerald Ford's decision to run or not is his wife's health. Betty Ford looked fine to us. She says she is fine, but she doesn't want her husband to run, and she's told him so. This is Barbara Walters in Palm Springs, California.
This is the wettest, worst winter we've ever had. But it's the best winter we've ever had for colds. We've got more relief this year because now we use Dristan.
Today's Dristan. Now the yellow sign gives you maximum strength for runny nose, sneezing, and nasal congestion. Time capsules don't. Dristan's white side has medicine for pain and fever. Extra relief capsules don't have.
Have a better winter with Dristan.
Today's Dristan tablets. Maximum strength plus extra relief.
Well, you know what they say, weekends are made for Michelob. It makes sense, really. Saturday, Sunday, they are.
Well, thank you.
Even Friday nights, they're your days. And you want your weekend to be as good as you can make it. That's how Anheuser-Busch feels, too, about this beer, Michelob. As good as you can make it.
Weekends were made for Michelob.
Yeah.
A year ago, I reported on the Bell System's commitment to solving business problems. We now have teams of problem solvers for every industry symbolized here. Transportation, retailing, finance, healthcare, education, and many more, for which we've designed communication systems to answer business problems. We're not just designing a symbol for your industry, we're redesigning the Bell System's marketing approach to serve your needs.
friends, here's Taste. A great tasting cereal with a crispy crunch called CW Post. Sure, everybody likes it, even the kids. Pardon me, son, that's mine. It's got taste that'll grab you right off of the spoon. It's vitamin fortified, natural too. Oats, rice, honey, and more with a crunch that's crispy like CW Post. Here's Taste. Great tasting cereal with a crispy crunch called CW Post. Family-style cereal. Pardon me, son, that's mine.
Don't pack your things and investigate real estate prices in the tropics yet, but there's a theory advanced by climatologists that the last 2 years of battering by winter means that an ice age is returning to the Earth with glaciers down to the Mason-Dixon line and freezing temperatures south of that. Most people don't realize it, but the history of the Earth is it is mostly ice-covered, with mere blips of warmth like the one we've been having. The rhythm is 100,000 years of ice cover interrupted by blips of warmth lasting only 10,000 years. Our period has now lasted its allotted 10,000 years, going on 11, and signs of cooling have already begun. They began about 1945. Homely things like the flight of the heat-loving armadillo from Nebraska to Mexico, steadily cooler ship readings of Atlantic waters, shorter crop-growing seasons, more summer frosts in our upper Middle West. Then there are computerized esoteric data I can neither explain nor understand. A consoling thought is at least an equal body of climatologists believe the cooling itself is a blip and the warmth will resume. But a reporter outraged that man can go to the moon but can't do anything about the common cold may be forgiven for leaning to the pessimistic view. Perhaps when my cold improves, my view will too. But right now, with a bottle of aspirin in one pocket and vitamin C in the other, the bleak view is attractive. Misery loves company, and the theory of an onsetting ice age promises lots of it. Harry?
Thank you, Howard. Again, tonight's top stories. Unemployment falls off sharply to the lowest level in 3 years. The government declares cigarette smoking public enemy number 1. Egypt and Israel open military negotiations. And 2 Russian cosmonaut crews link up in space orbit. That's the news. Good night.
To a new beginning. Trading passion and power.
You make it sound like I seduced him on the terrace or something.
To survive the pressures of today.
And when people fall in love, they can't help it. It just happens.
One life to live, and General Hospital expand to full hours following All My Children. Now, there's more time for love in the afternoon.
Beginning Monday on ABC.
Thursday, meet Cotter's new sweat hog.
My name is Vinnie Barbarino, and very shortly you're going to start to feel faint.
A female sweat hog? Then...
Harry's been up in a flying saucer. What?
It's a close encounter of a fishy kind. Then a ghost haunts the 12th precinct.
I think we can rule out the win.
And the chief becomes a swinging single.
I'm going to get that divorce if it costs me every penny you got.
On Carter Country.
Watch tomorrow starting at 8, 7 Central and Mountain on ABC. This has been the ABC Evening News with Harry Reisner and Barbara Walters. Young Tommy Bradford learns the meaning of manhood tonight. When David lends his kid brother his pad, it looks like the boys are in for a night of revelry, but Tommy takes on more than he can handle, and it takes Abby to bail him out on 8 is Enough. Watch tonight on ABC.